Okay, mes chers collègues sont ici avec nous. Okay, good afternoon. Before I begin, I'm delighted to share some good news from Ottawa, where the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act has just received royal assent. This is an important step forward in our government's economic plan. It will help build more homes faster and introduce greater competition in the grocery sector. Alors, aujourd'hui, j'ai accueilli une réunion des ministres des Finances du fédéral, des provinces et des territoires. Et deux de mes homologues sont ici avec nous. Bienvenue. Et nous avons eu des conversations productives sur la manière de continuer à travailler ensemble en vue de bâtir une économie qui fonctionne pour tout le monde. Le travail que nous accomplissons ensemble se fonde sur la force de l'économie canadienne aujourd'hui, de même que sur les progrès que nous avons réalisés ensemble au cours des dernières années pour soutenir la population canadienne. Inflation is down. Wage growth has outpaced inflation now for 10 months in a row. And private sector economists now expect Canada to avoid the post-pandemic recession that many had predicted. But we all know that many Canadians are still struggling to make ends meet, to juggle all of their bills at the end of the month, and to feel confident about their future. That's why we know we have work to do to unlock a brighter future for everyone in this amazing country. In the first half of this year, Canada received the third most foreign direct investment of any country in the whole world, and more investment per capita than any of our G7 allies. Most importantly, compared to before the pandemic, over 1 million more Canadians are employed today. Les frais de garde d'enfants ont été réduits d'au moins 50% à travers le pays et grâce à notre système abordable d'apprentissage et de garde des jeunes enfants à l'échelle du Canada, 7 provinces et territoires ont réduit les frais à seulement 10 $ par jour. Nous renforçons le système de santé publique et universel du Canada grâce à l'investissement sans précédent de 198 milliards de dollars consenti pour notre gouvernement plus tôt cette année, et nous négocions des accords bilatéraux qui vont contribuer à fournir à la population canadienne les soins de grande qualité qu'ils méritent. And, as I said at the beginning of our meeting this morning, in 2024-25, our government will deliver a record $99.4 billion in major federal transfers to provinces and territories. This is an increase of $4.8 billion from last year. Over half of this money, $52.1 billion, will be delivered through the Canada Health Transfer. Today's meeting was about building on this progress and finding new ways for us all to work together. We had a very full agenda. We heard from the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, and discussed the economic outlook, including inflation and interest rates for Canada and the world. Inflation is down, but we all know that interest rates are a real challenge for millions of Canadians, so it was important for us to speak about the economic outlook today. We also discussed housing, which is the central priority for so many Canadians. Our government has made significant progress on housing this fall, including with the measure that received royal assent today, lifting the GST. I'm very, very happy about that. We've unlocked billions of dollars in new financing to build over 100,000 new homes. We're helping 300,000 Canadians and counting save up for their first down payment through the new tax-free First Home Savings Account. And with the new Canadian Mortgage Charter, we're protecting Canadians who are struggling to renew their mortgages. Our government is leading this national effort, but we know that making housing more affordable requires all orders of government working together. C'est pourquoi nous avons parlé à quel point il était important pour les provinces et les territoires de faire tout ce qui est en leur pouvoir pour contribuer à la construction de plus de logements plus rapidement et de soutenir les efforts que nous déployons pour sévir contre les locations à court terme qui empêchent un trop grand nombre de logements d'être mis sur le marché. Nous avons discuté de ce que les provinces et les territoires peuvent faire pour contribuer à éliminer les obstacles à la mobilité de la main-d'œuvre au Canada, ainsi qu'à améliorer la reconnaissance des titres de compétences étrangers, deux mesures qui permettraient de remédier aux pénuries de main-d'œuvre dans les secteurs de la construction et des soins de santé. And of course, we spoke about the Canada Pension Plan. Protecting the pensions of every single Canadian is a priority for our government, and we will always stand up for the Canada Pension Plan and for the secure and dignified retirement it provides for all Canadians. These were just some of the many topics that we spoke about as finance ministers today. I do want to say it was a very collaborative and productive meeting. In a country as big and as diverse as ours, we are never going to agree about every single thing. But we all do want to build a better country for all Canadians, and that was very much the spirit of our conversations today, looking for areas where we do agree and where we can work together. I was very glad to host my colleagues here in Toronto today in my own riding of University Rosedale, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work together in the days to come. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Questions from journalists. On va maintenant prendre les questions des journalistes. There'll be one question, one follow-up. There's a microphone right there for journalists interested in asking questions. Une question et une question en suivi. Il y a un micro juste là.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Laura Stone with the Globe and Mail. I wanted to follow up on the Alberta pension issue. So it's my understanding that there's some sort of meeting with Alberta later in January to discuss the terms of how the actuary is going to come up with their figures. Can you just explain the process further and how long you think it will take?
Sure. As I said, we did talk about the Canada Pension Plan. It's an issue that is very much front of mind for finance ministers across the country. I thought one finance minister put it very well when she said the Canada Pension Plan provides certainty for Canadians at a time of real anxiety and uncertainty. So that was really the tenor of the conversation. In terms of the specifics, here's what we discussed. We talked about the tasking to the chief actuary. We agreed that this is a really complicated job, that different assumptions can make a very big difference in outcomes, that we need to be very deliberate about the tasking, and that we all need to be very transparent about the tasking. And we also agreed that every single province and territory has a stake in this process and has the right to be heard and to have a seat at the table. In terms of what we've done and what we agreed to do going forward, at the officials level led by deputy ministers, there was a meeting held earlier this week to discuss the tasking to the chief actuary. Officials reported back to us today on that work, and officials proposed to us, as they had discussed at that meeting earlier this week, that there would be a further meeting at the officials level in January to define the tasking.
Okay.
Oui, bien sûr. Alors, comme j'ai dit, on a discuté notre système des pensions au Canada et c'est vraiment un enjeu qui est important pour tous les ministres des Finances au Canada. Et on a été d'accord, comme une de mes homologues a dit, que nous sommes chanceuses au Canada. nous avons un système fort, un système qui donne de la sécurité et de la dignité à tous nos âgés. Et ma priorité est de préserver ce système. C'est très important pour notre pays. Concernant les détails, on est d'accord que l'évaluation, c'est une question très technique. On doit être très précise, on doit être très, très transparente et toutes les voix de toutes les provinces et territoires doivent être considérées. Au niveau des fonctionnaires, nos fonctionnaires, sur le leadership du sous-ministre des Finances du Canada, avons eu une réunion plus tôt cette semaine. Nous avons dit la conclusion de cette réunion et la conclusion était qu'ils veulent avoir encore une réunion en janvier pour préciser l'évaluation qu'on va faire. C'est ça.
And Minister, do you think, what do you make of Alberta's argument that of why they're even exploring this? That, they feel they have a right to explore what their kind of contributions to the pension plan is. They want to see they want some clarity on the numbers from Ottawa's perspective and from their own report, and they kind of argue that they've been larger contributors to the Canadian economy. Do you think that Alberta has the right to ask that question?
Well, let's be very clear. The legislation is clear. Any province or territory does have the right to choose to leave the CPP. There's no debate about that. The federal government's contention, though, is first and foremost that we have a great system. We have a system that works, which actually is the envy of the world. Quite literally, other countries come to Canada to look at the CPP and figure out how we do it. When ratings agencies assess Canada's economic and fiscal strength, one of the first things they say is, you guys have a pension system that works and is fully funded. And, for Canadians, what that means is people in Canada today, every single Canadian, every single one of us, and, our parents, our grandparents, know that they can have a safe and dignified retirement. That is ultimately what this is about. The federal government is very clear that it is our view that the CPP works. It provides dignity and security to all Canadians. It works for Albertans, too. And it was important to have this conversation because this is actually an issue that touches every single Canadian. And what I heard around the table, as I heard at our virtual meeting a few weeks ago, is that every single finance minister representing every province and territory has a view about the CPP and recognizes the value of the system we have for the people in their province and territory. So this was an opportunity for people to express that and to talk about why the CPP really, really matters for the people of Canada, and then to talk about a clear, deliberate, and transparent process going forward.
All right.
Thanks.
Next question. Prochaine question.
Michelle Song, CBC News. Minister Freeland, are you willing to reconsider the request to extend the Canada Emergency Business Account loan repayments?
Well, we have extended the CEBA deadline. It's important to be really clear because I know that people have some anxiety about it, which is completely understandable. So what we did, what we announced in September, is if you took out a CEBA loan, you have up until the end of 2026. That is 3 more years before you have to repay it. And during those 3 years, you will pay 5% interest, which is that is an extremely favorable term for a loan. So I really want to emphasize that because I know people are worried, and I just want to say you have 3 years to pay it back, and the rate of interest charged, pay it back by January 18th. then you can get $20,000 forgiven if you took out the full $60,000.
Now that Bill C-21 has passed in Senate, how much are you budgeting to buy back previously legal firearms and compensate their owners? Will this really cost taxpayers over $750 million, as the parliamentary budget officer estimated?
Thank you for the question, and I'm actually really glad to be asked the question here in my riding of University Rosedale in downtown Toronto. And I'm speaking now as the local MP, but also as a mother of teenagers. I think every single one of us is worried about gun violence. One Canadian being killed by a gun is one Canadian too many. I am really proud of the measures our government is taking to get guns off the street in Canada, and we're going to live up to our commitment to Canadians.
Next question, question.
Tara Deschamps from the Canadian Press. I just want to follow up on the Alberta and pension plan discussion from before and just ask for a more precise timeline about when we might get that actual calculation of how much the Alberta government would be entitled to if it leaves the pension plan.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. And let me just reiterate the most important thing, which minister after minister after minister came back to today. And that is, we understand the importance of the CPP. We understand its value. We understand that it works. And it works by providing a safe and dignified retirement for Canadians. And really, you know, ministers were quite, some of them, emotional talking about that, because we know that a lot of people are anxious today. And knowing you're going to get your pension is a huge comfort, and rightly so. On the specifics, deputy ministers met. Officials led by the Deputy Minister of Finance, convened by the Deputy Minister of Finance, had a meeting earlier this week. It was to discuss the specifics of the tasking to the Chief Actuary. That is a technical and complicated process. Officials reported back to the ministerial table today about the different parameters that they discussed. And they talked about the different issues that need to be taken into account in finalizing that tasking. And they did that in a transparent way where every minister representing every province and territory was able to hear what are the issues they're talking about. What they decided when they met earlier this week, and they proposed to us, the ministerial table, was this is really complicated. We need to get it right, and we need to be sure every aspect is fully aired and considered. And we need to be sure that every single province and territory has the time and the right to think about this from their perspective, and to be sure that every issue from their perspective is raised. And specific provinces and territories, all of them did raise issues. Issues like portability, issues like the cases of people who spend most of their working life in one province and then retire in another province. That's what ministers discussed. Officials discussed the range of issues earlier this week. They came back to us today and they said, this is very complicated. It's an area where the assumptions you make, even small differences in assumptions, can lead to a very different outcome. And so they proposed to us that the officials table would meet again in January to discuss the tasking to the Chief Actuary. And we all agreed that that was a good idea. We agreed that all provinces and territories would be represented there. And we agreed that it's really important to ask the right questions, to be transparent about the thinking that goes into putting those questions on the table, and to be sure that every province and territory has, is a full and fully informed participant in that process. So that's what's going to happen.
Do you think from the time that you do the meeting, we'll be waiting then months afterwards? Do you think we'll be waiting until summer to sort of know that figure?
I learned during the NAFTA negotiations never to answer hypothetical questions. It's not a good idea for an elected political leader. What I think was very clear in the conversation today, when we heard back from officials, was how technical this work is, how complex this work is, and given how vitally important the issue is, like this is literally about Canadians being to retire in security and dignity, we agreed that we're going to do the work and define the tasking very carefully, very deliberately, and crucially, really transparently. It's a conversation that all provinces and territories were present for, and officials representing all of them will be present at the discussion in January.
Next question, prochaine question.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Siobhan Morris from CTV News. In your home riding, recently Ontario and the City of Toronto reached what they call a new deal when it comes to finances that hinges on the federal government matching some provincial money. Is the federal government prepared to do that when it comes to new subway cars and shelter supports?
Well, first of all, and the Ontario Finance Minister is here with us, let me just congratulate Ontario and the City of Toronto for reaching a deal which both the province and the city described as historic. I agree with that adjective, and it's really, really good to see the city and the province working closely and effectively together. In terms of the federal government, we have a good relationship with both the province and the city, and we're going to keep on working together. It's probably worth my pointing out that no federal government in Canadian history has invested as much in cities overall, and specifically in the City of Toronto, as our government has. The year we formed government, 2015, in that year, the federal government was investing $200 million in Toronto. Since that year, between that year and today, the federal government has invested $5.5 billion directly in the City of Toronto. That is a huge increase. And we are currently investing $8.5 billion directly in public transit capital investments in Toronto, including a massive investment in this riding just down the road from here in the Bloor-Yonge subway station.
So I understand the conversations are going to continue. Toronto's coming up to their budget cycle. Will they have an answer from the federal government, some sort of resolution, even if it's not the amount they've asked for, in time for budget season?
So as I've said, we are investing massively in Toronto. We are glad to be doing that. This is an incredible city. It is the economic engine of Ontario and Canada. I'm proud to represent this riding, and we're glad to continue having constructive conversations with the city.
All right, we have time for one last question. Une dernière question.
Catherine Brulotte de Radio-Canada. Vous avez parlé de l'importance du logement dans les discussions, mais aussi pour les provinces. Est-ce que les discussions d'aujourd'hui ont permis l'exploration de mesures pour accélérer la construction de logements au pays ou encore pour faciliter peut-être l'accès aux fonds fédéraux pour la construction sur lesquels il y a plusieurs provinces, voire des municipalités qui comptent?
Merci pour la question. Et on a discuté le logement. On est tous d'accord que c'est un des enjeux les plus importants au Canada. Tous les ministres étaient d'accord sur cela. On a discuté quelques mesures spécifiques, incluant les terrains publics. Et on a discuté comment le fédéral, les provinces et les municipalités peuvent travailler ensemble pour construire de plus sur les terres qu'on a maintenant. Et j'ai dit aux provinces et territoires que le fédéral est prêt à travailler en plus étroite collaboration avec tous les provinces et territoires pour utiliser les terres que nous avons maintenant. Et j'ai invité les provinces et territoires de contribuer les terres qu'ils ont et d'encourager les municipalités de faire la même chose. C'est juste un enjeu particulier. On a discuté aussi les conséquences des entreprises comme Airbnb et Vrbo, les locataires à court terme. Et on a eu une très bonne conversation. On était tous d'accord que c'est les mesures que le fédéral a mises en place, qui aident les mesures que beaucoup de provinces et municipalités ont aussi mises en place, est une mesure importante parce que ça nous permettra de créer plus de logements immédiatement. Tout le monde comprend que c'est important de construire de plus vite, mais la bonne chose avec cette mesure concernant la location court terme, c'est qu'on pourra créer plus de logements pour les Canadiens demain. Et beaucoup des provinces ont parlé de les chiffres concrets spécifiques dans leur province qu'on pourra libérer grâce à cette mesure. Et en général, on a discuté l'ambition du fédéral de construire de plus rapidement. Les ministres des Finances étaient d'accord. On a parlé d'une manière de financement pour construire plus vite. Et on va continuer la conversation. Concernant le Québec, on a parlé dans notre conversation bilatérale avec le ministre Girard hier. On est tous les deux, nous sommes très contents avec l'accord sur le logement entre le fédéral et la province du Québec qui versera 900 millions de dollars du fédéral à la province pour aider la construction du logement.
OK, parfait. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. That ends today's press conference. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And it's Friday afternoon, so I wish everyone a really great weekend in the sunshine.
Excuse me for a second. There we go. There we go. Yeah, happy to take a few questions, and I want to echo my thanks to the Minister for holding this conference, not only in Toronto, but in our home province of Ontario.
Okay, please come to the mic for your questions.
Hello, Minister. I have to ask about pensions.
Breaking news, pensions
Yeah,
from Laura
exactly.
Stone.
Yeah, exactly. So it sounds like, the officials are meeting next month to even go over the terms of what the actuary would come up with. Do you think this process is going to drag on for months or even years as Alberta kind of weighs whether it wants to leave the CPP?
I'm not going to speculate on that. What I will say, I wrote the letter and asked Chrystia for the meeting a month or two ago, and she agreed to that meeting because I believe, and I still believe, that it's important for the people of Canada to have certainty and stability in their pensions at a time of a lot of instability around the world. Alberta being in the pension plan, the Canada Pension Plan, is good for Alberta, it's good for Canada, it's good for Ontario. So we're going to continue pushing and that we have a process that's clear, that's timely, that's deliberate and thoughtful to resolve. And we want Alberta to stay in. And let's be clear.
Alberta says, look, they want us to stay in so badly because we contribute so much. That's how they're kind of using that argument. I mean, do you understand where the province is coming from of why they want this explored, or do you think that it would be a mistake for them to pursue this?
I think the facts have to be laid out, and let's be clear. Like their methodology that they commissioned would mean that two provinces would have 120% of the assets, and I think some of the other provinces might have an issue with that. The math has to work so that there's 100%. A lot of assumptions and numbers go into this. So I've been around for some time in the pension world, the finance world. It's important that we are very clear about the process, the assumptions, and I think what we did today is advance that conversation.
Hi, Minister. Where would you, or how would you qualify where things are in the discussions with the federal government and the province in having them come to the table and meet what you've offered in the New Deal with Toronto?
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, we have a lot of asylum seekers here in Toronto, in Ontario, because for all the right reasons, we're having more people come into Canada. And we're the beneficiaries of that, and that's a good thing. But we can't just let people in and then say, good luck to you. So we've done a historic deal with Toronto where we're putting an historic amount of money into homelessness. I put in a 40% increase in the budget for homelessness prevention right across the province, but Toronto disproportionately has a lot more asylum seekers and a homelessness challenge. So I think it's totally legitimate. You know, the city and the province have come together to ask the federal government, who is responsible for immigration, to do their part. And we've been very clear that we would like the federal government to step up. I think the mayor of Toronto has been pretty clear. The premier has been pretty clear. And I think it's the right thing to do.
I know the money was described as being contingent, both for the shelters. The subway, I understand a little bit more, but is the province really not going to share the funding if the federal government washes their hands of the whole thing?
Look, you know, it's important that we have these conversations. To the minister's comments about how much more funding has come since 2015, this is not 2015. This is 2023. We've just gone through a pandemic. Collectively, federal, provincial money has come in to support cities across the country and provinces across the country. But now we have historic numbers of people coming to Canada. That is a good thing. We had almost 500,000 population growth in Ontario last year, maybe another 500,000 this year, 1 million in 2 years. We have an opportunity with the federal government, not just on asylum seekers and subway cars, but a big, bold infrastructure plan for Canada. We have a $180 billion plan that was launched in 2015 that's been all spoken for. And now we're in unprecedented times in terms of population growth. I, for one, would say not like to reduce immigration. I'd like to keep the numbers, but make sure that we have the infrastructure, the housing, the water, the sewage, the trains, the roads, the schools, and the hospitals, because we're a beacon of stability and hope around the world. And I think we should, this is our moment to step up. And I just know that when the federal government and the provincial government and municipalities row together, we can get it done. So we're very hopeful that our message of infrastructure will get through to the Minister of Finance and show up in her budget in 2024.
I'm just wondering if you can share a bit more about what you're hearing from Ontario's business community around the Alberta pension plan and sort of what it means for them.
Business likes certainty and stability. I think people on the receiving end of those pensions, they contributed throughout their careers, or people just going in. The minister mentioned portability, you know, moving around Canada, making sure if you work in one jurisdiction that it's portable. There's a lot to sort out here. Business wants us to continue attracting people so they can have labor, training people. The labor market transfer agreement, very important. That top-up is so critical because it's one thing to have an infrastructure plan. If you don't have people to build or people to service our hospitals and our schools, then I don't like our chances. So that's so important that we continue to provide an environment where businesses can create jobs and that we can provide the services and programs they need.
I'm also wondering if you can share a bit about the mood around that issue today, whether or not it was sort of an Alberta versus everyone situation, or it was a bit more nuanced than that.
No. With regard to the pension, very collaborative, and with regard to infrastructure, and the Minister Freeland felt that we were very coordinated, and I would say not really, because independently right across this country, housing, infrastructure, sewage, water, all the roads, bridges, these are fun. When you have a population growth of over 1 million people a year, this is where we have to step up. This is our time. We got to row together. We got to be bold. The federal government has the fiscal capacity. The provinces and the municipalities are indicating that they're willing to participate in a program like that. So I'm an optimist, and I'm a builder like our Premier and our colleagues here in Ontario, and we hope that we can continue doing the right thing, nation building for all of Canada.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bonjour. Alors, simplement pour dire que ces rencontres sont extrêmement utiles. Il y a eu rencontre bilatérale hier Canada-Québec, rencontre des provinces et territoires, souper ministre des Finances avec la vice-première ministre et la rencontre aujourd'hui. Ces rencontres-là sont extrêmement utiles et ça a permis vraiment de concentrer les priorités des provinces et territoires pour le budget fédéral 24-25 et je dirais qu'il y avait consensus pour un accroissement des dépenses en infrastructure et aussi pour une poursuite des transferts au niveau de la main-d'œuvre. Alors, ça me ferait plaisir de prendre des questions.
Bonjour, Catherine Brulotte de Radio-Canada. Si la conférence de presse de cet après-midi est proportionnelle, il y a quand même été question beaucoup du programme de pension du Canada, là, qui est une discussion pour laquelle le Québec a un siège assez particulier. Est-ce que vous avez été capable de prendre une position, de faire partie de cette conversation-là sur le programme qui existe au Québec, le rôle peut-être que peut jouer le Québec dans le questionnement de l'Alberta dans tout ça?
Je vous dirais que les discussions ont été assez courtes. Ça a plus été une présentation des étapes qui vont suivre dans l'analyse de l'étude actuarielle qui sera faite, du travail qui sera fait par l'actuaire en chef du Canada. Et l'intérêt du Québec, c'est évidemment ce qu'on appelle en anglais portability, c'est-à-dire la possibilité pour les travailleurs de passer d'un régime de pension à l'autre. Alors, je dirais qu'on a un rôle d'observateur extrêmement intéressé. Alors, si une province quittait le régime de pension du Canada, il faudrait qu'il y ait une entente avec le Québec pour les travailleurs qui vont et viennent de cette province.
Puis on vient de recevoir le communiqué qui parle d'une hausse, là, si je fais les mathématiques très rapidement, là, mais du déficit de 200 millions de dollars à peu près, si je comprends bien. Est-ce que vous voulez faire des commentaires sur ça?
C'est certain que l'économie ralentit. Ça, c'est le rapport trimestriel qui sortait aujourd'hui. Vous êtes très rapide à analyser ça. C'est rare que j'ai des questions le jour même. Alors, le déficit est révisé légèrement à la hausse et ça reflète le fait que l'économie ralentit et que tant au niveau des sociétés d'État et des entreprises privées, il y a moins de revenus. Les revenus ralentissent.
Bonjour, monsieur. Can I ask a question in English?
Oui.
Merci. I just wanted to know what Quebec thinks of Alberta exploring the separate pension plan. Do you support that? Do you think that there's value in that for the province?
We really look at this from the outside. What's really important for Quebecers is that the portability aspect for workers remain in any future development. I think in this debate, there is a strong consensus in Canada for Alberta to stay in the CPP, if there were to have such a situation, there's a strong debate on the assumption that Alberta, strong concern with respect to the assumption that Alberta used to make their claim to a very important share of the plan. So that aspect is definitely debatable, and that's why the chief actuary will be asked to do its own evaluation. But as far as managing a public pension plan successfully, I think we've proven in Quebec that this is feasible. So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Alberta always points to Quebec as an example of why can't we do it if Quebec does it. Do you think that argument has any validity?
Well, on the, I think in what Alberta has mentioned, and I'm not here to speak for Alberta, but I think there's a really strong argument or debate over the share that they would have if they were to leave. That's definitely a very important question, and I think that there will be more important evaluation before any agreement would would come out. But on the ability of a province to manage its own public pension outside of the, I think there's that, yes, Alberta would be capable of doing that, I have no doubt. C'est tout? Merci beaucoup et bonne fin de semaine.